This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona, and we are delighted to have with us two authors, John Land and Jeff Ayers, and they write together as A.J. Landau, and they have their second book, Cold Burn, has just come out, and yeah, follow up to Leave No Trace. And the two authors have very kindly agreed to sign a bunch of books for us. And those that haven't arrived yet, but they should be here very shortly. So if you'd like to reserve one, I'll put a link in the comments field. And if you have questions, go ahead and type them in, and Barbara will bring me on screen towards the end of the hour, and I'd be happy to ask any of your questions. So, Barbara, over to you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. It gives me a feeling of power to summon Patrick up. It's sort of like Shakespeare, bringing up one of Caliban or Ariel from the deep. But anyway, it's very nice I've read John's columns for a long time. You used to write, or do you still write for the Big Thrill, John?
No, I haven't. I have a column I do monthly called it's called The Big Thrill. It's called, oh my God, The Thrill List. And it's on
Ah,
Book Trip, Merrill Moss's site. And I have fun with it. And I get to choose the books I want to do. And I like to mix up between always like to include some indie authors. I like a nice gender mix. I try to diversify. In my old age, I'm trying to widen my horizons, Barbara.
Don't you dare talk to me about old age, honey.
Ah,
Lord, no,
hey,
no, no.
we're kids in this industry.
Yes, we are. Absolutely. Well, no, you are. I'm not. But anyway, I really have enjoyed your reviews, and we'll come back to the question of why you decided to write. But Jeff, tell us about your background. What is it? You have a long career in the book world too.
Yes, I'm a retired public librarian, and I've been reviewing books for places like Library Journal, the Associated Press, Book List for over 25 years. I currently review for Library Journal and Criminal Element and First Clue. And I've been a avid reader since I was 3 years old, and getting to be on this side of it is just wonderful.
It's a different perspective, isn't it? Love
Oh,
it.
definitely.
Yeah, you know Lisa Holstein, our blogger, who is also a reviewer for Library Journal.
Ah,
Mhm. Yeah.
And John Charles of our staff, who is a reviewer for book lists. So, it's sort of fun to. I love having a staff that is so well read and influential in the book world. I think that it gives us a chance to cover. Everybody thinks we're a mystery bookstore still, but we haven't been a mystery bookstore forever. Partly because the staff has diverse interests. So we just hosted a science fiction night for Phoenix Fan Fusion. John is planning Bookstore Romance Day. We do a lot of different things. And when COVID came along and gave us Zoom and this platform was enhanced, it's really made a difference in the kinds of things we can do. For example, getting both of you together on screen, which would be difficult logistically to get you both to Scottsdale. So, well, it wouldn't be difficult, but it's apparently not a high priority currently.
Well, and
No,
we live across
Hector,
the country
sorry.
from each other.
I'm sending a message to their publicist saying, it's
uh-huh.
okay, Hector. But here we are. Anyway, I did not feature the first book, Leave No Trace, because I couldn't work out the logistics for one of our book clubs of getting two authors in different parts of the country to sign the same book. And so I regrettably kind of let it go by. But this time I couldn't resist reading Cold Burn, partly, guys, because I've been to Glacier Bay, Alaska many times. Starting long ago when there were actually glaciers in Glacier Bay, and
Yeah.
recognizing that's no longer. So I read it and I loved it, and I was able to persuade the publicist not only could we do a Zoom event, but the two authors are going to sign their books when they're in New York for Thriller Fest next week. I
Mhm.
too will be at Thriller Fest next week, but not
Forward to
actually.
seeing you. Yep.
So, as a consequence, the books aren't here, but they are our July crime subscription book pick of the month. And I'm doing that in part. Not only did I love your book, but I think it's important that we focus on and um, put some energy into our national parks, which I think are endangered for a variety of reasons. And I don't want to go into politics, but I think they are one of the great achievements of this country. And I would be desolate to see them in any way, diminished. So I hope your books will kind of raise awareness for people about how valuable they are.
I
When
hope
you
so.
wrote it, did you actually have Elon Musk in mind for I mean, it's just so perfect, that there he is wanting to go to Mars and do, I mean, sorry, I hope that wasn't a big spoiler, but did you
Oh,
actually make him up or did you model him on Elon? Elon?
well, I think first off, he compares himself to Elon Musk.
Right,
So that's to persuade. But as far as the inspiration for Axel Cole, who is the villain of the book, the real villain,
right.
um, is the mindset that Elon Musk represents. All me, not you. The zero sum game principle. That for him to win, everybody else has to lose. And that is the danger. In his farewell speech in 1960, Eisenhower warned about the military industrial complex. Well, now we're dealing with the military technological complex,
Right.
represented by people like Musk and the tech bros, as they're called. And they are a culture all unto themselves. And capturing their mindset, which is so antithetical for everything I believe in. It would be too kind to Elon Musk and be boosting him up too much to say he was the sole model for Axel Cole.
Okay.
Axel Cole is much more than just Elon Musk.
Jeff, comment from you?
I would agree with that. And we sort of came up with Axel Cole initially, sort of in a strange way, because the initial thing we talked about was our hero Michael Walker going to Alaska to try and solve a series of thefts of native artifacts. And at one point, John calls me and says, it's got to be more than just that. There's got to be something in the artifacts. And
Mm-hmm.
so I said, what? Something like, they find like a powder or something that could launch us to Mars. And he goes, yes, that's it. And and so then we
Of course,
went
that's
back
it,
and forth.
right?
Why
What?
not?
Right. Sorry, I've been Clive Cussler's bookseller, for
Oh,
so long.
right. Yeah.
There you
That was
go.
not an improbable idea, but we shouldn't really start out talking about the villain. Sorry about that. I just couldn't resist it.
Oh, no. And we've been inspired by the authors that we love as well, Cussler being one of them for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to Michael Walker. Talk to us a bit about his first adventure, since we didn't have a chance to present that to our customers.
Michael Walker is an agent with the ISB, which is the Investigative Services Branch of the National Park Service, which gives him authority to go to any national park site, any place they oversee, over 430 locations, and help solve crimes there. And we did that primarily because we didn't want to have us say, okay, he's going to be in this one park, and then try and figure out how is he going to get to that park. Because of his job, he can be there, and
Right.
that makes total sense. And he has a prosthetic foot after an incident that happened at Mount Rainier where he also lost his wife. So he wears his grief every day. And in Leave No Trace, there's a domestic terrorist incident at the Statue of Liberty, and he is sent there to represent the Park Service and find out what happened. And he meets Gina Delgado, who works for the FBI, and the two of them try and solve this domestic terrorist case, not realizing that what they've stumbled into is something that a person wants to destroy the entire Park Service and everything the Park Service oversees.
So that was a good design to have two people with national jurisdiction, the FBI on the one hand and IBS on the other. I remember getting a ticket in Great Smoky Mountain National Park, and I was really surprised that the ticketer was a park ranger.
There's different levels of park
I thought
ranger.
they were
Yeah.
just there looking after the bears and whatever. So,
No,
suddenly I got a ticket.
the
Uh,
major parks do have what's called a law enforcement officer, and they're the
yeah.
ones that
And I
take.
don't know if your fellow Minotaur author, Paul Doiron, if you read him, but he has a Maine game warden as his protagonist. And in Maine, the game wardens also are investigators. So they have, full detective and arresting powers and so forth, which I find really fascinating. I don't believe that's true in every state, although I can't swear to that, but certainly in Maine, um, the game wardens can do kind of the same thing.
Well, and you also have Chuck Box's wonderful Joe Pickett, who's also a game warden in Wyoming.
It's true. And of course, what's the word I want? Nevada Barr was a very dear friend.
Oh,
We started out together with Track of the Cat and went all the way through her career, from which I think many people learned things about the national parks. Nevada had been a park ranger before she started writing. So,
we
and then
actually
it's
share
always,
the same editor that Nevada had.
you do?
Hmm.
Well, then that makes it yeah, anyway, I think the idea of national parks as a setting and being able to visit different ones rather than the same one is an excellent idea. So have either of you been to Glacier Bay, John?
No, I've never been, besides some of the more popular memorials like Statue of Liberty, Liberty Park, and Independence Hall. I've never been to any of the national parks. Confession time. So that's why Jeff and I complement each other so well. We balance each other off perfectly. I think the worst writing teams are when the authors are too similar because then there's no balance. There's no balance. And with Jeff and I, the process is it's seamless because I always tell people, especially with collaborations, writing the book is the easy part. Figuring out what you're writing is the hard part, and having someone to bounce stuff with and go back and forth with. And both books, and Jeff referenced that the great thing about Jeff is being on the West Coast. I can call him at midnight my time. It's only 9 o'clock, Barbara, so he has no choice but to answer the phone, and I'll go, I just thought of something. Literally, I'm a pantser. Jeff loves telling the story about sending me the outline for this when he wanted to partner up with me. And I still have not looked at the outline that he did for Leave No Trace because I don't believe in outlines. I believe that a story should flow organically, where if the writer doesn't know what's going to happen next, the reader can't possibly know what's going to happen next. So the easy part is the writing. The hard part is figuring out all the twists and turns and surprises and how to get yourself out of the corner you've boxed yourself into. So to me, I love to write. I love the process. I love storytelling, any kind of storytelling, nonfiction, fiction, you name it, I'll do it. Because it's all the same. It's all about creating people, or if they're in nonfiction, personifying people in a way that make the reader care about them and root for them and want them to win. And in fiction, especially our fiction, if they don't win, everybody loses. They have to win in Glacier Bay. Michael Walker has to win in Glacier Bay at the same time Gina Delgado has to win in the Everglades, or we all lose.
So the
And
trick with writing with a partner would be cooperation rather than conflict.
I've had some conflicted back and forths with other writers, and it hasn't always worked out, and some have ended not well. Jeff has been. I also write a series with Heather Graham, and we can complete each other's sentences. It's like we're married, you know. Uh, and Jeff is kind of the same way, but we're not quite married. Jeff has 2 kids and a wife, so we can't do
who
that.
loves your science, by the way?
Yes, that's the other thing. Barbara, Terry Ayers, Jeff's wife, is a scientist, a biochemist she knows everything, and we'll send her stuff, and after she gets out of the bathroom from throwing up, she'll try to come up with a way to make what we did or what we're trying to do credible. I live by what Robert Louis Stevenson said. It doesn't matter to me if you believe what I'm writing is true. All that matters to me is that you do not disbelieve it. The suspension of disbelief. You mentioned Clive Cussler, James Rollins, speculative writers who aren't afraid to create something that doesn't exist. Michael Crichton in the Andromeda Strain. And that's what especially Cold Burn does. It creates something that doesn't exist but could.
And
So,
John is the non-park person. I'm the park guy.
Yeah, he goes
With
to
my with my librarian background as well, research. I love doing research. And I last summer visited Glacier Bay and had a wonderful time, talked to some wonderful people. And you could find me taking really odd pictures because I knew we might be utilizing it in the book.
well, the first time I went to Glacier Bay in the 1980s, when cruise ships were just barely going up to Alaska, now they commute, but they didn't back then. It was so pristine. There was a really very rigorous protocols involved about, the ship going in, and we all had to observe them. And the last time I was there, sadly, the glaciers have largely disappeared, and it's a different environment. It's a place just like Glacier National Park in Montana where you can really see the world is warming.
For sure. Yeah. And they told us when we were in Glacier Bay that every day it's completely different. And they thought within the next 30 to 40 years, there won't be anything for us to see in Glacier Bay, which is
I think
unfortunate.
that's probably true. I mean, there's a glacier on the road from Seward to Anchorage that at one point, when I first went there again in the 80s, the glacier was right off the highway. And now it's gone away and around the corner. But it's true in other places as well. Certainly in Peru, Rob and I have hiked not in Peru, sorry, New Zealand, in the New Zealand Alps, and you can see where the glaciers have steadily receded. So I'm glad you captured the park, while it can still credibly be called Glacier Bay, because,
Yeah,
the only one I can think of today that really reminds me of it is Prince William Sound, which is at the southern end of Greenland. And it, when I was last there, which was a while ago, felt very much like Glacier Bay the first time that I went there, or even Glacier National Park, which I went to in the 50s with my parents. So it's been pretty rapid that this climate warming has affected the parks as it has.
Glacier National Park in Montana just is not the same as it used to be.
No, not
It's
at
very
all.
sad. Yeah.
However, I brought this up because in melting, there are things revealed under the glaciers that
that's
Mhm.
weren't
right.
there before. Now, in addition to being a Clive Cussler bookstore, we were also a Tony Hillerman bookstore. So the idea of native artifacts that people were trying to turn into cash or whatever they were doing with it was certainly not foreign to our reading experience. If either of you, Thief of Time was really Tony's book that was largely about that. Have either of you a Tony Hillerman reader?
I've read some of Tony's books, but not that one.
Ah, well, it will strike a chord
Okay.
should you read it. It's the one that won the Edgar.
Oh, okay.
And anyway, and we just did a Preston and Child event, talk about speculative,
Oh God, I
where
love
in fact we're in northern New Mexico and the canyons and the same kind of thing
Badlands.
Yeah,
is
good book.
going on. Badlands is really fabulous. I think of the five Nora Kelly books. Actually, I think the fourth Nora Kelly book is the best one because there isn't anything really speculative in it. You only think there is, but in the end, it's all real. It's a great achievement, but I like this one a lot because I think the canyon country in northern New Mexico is truly remarkable. Anyway, so you decided that because the ice is melting, things would pop up.
Yeah, we did. And it was when I think the first thing we thought of after Leave No Trace, which was a domestic terrorism thriller, we wanted to stay away from that. So doing a climate change environmental thriller seemed like a natural next step. And I had read, we had both read about DNA from the woolly mammoth, maybe bringing one back to life, which is ongoing now. They brought back
Extinction.
Yeah, they brought back the dire wolves.
Yeah.
Um, so, which led to the what if question, the two greatest words in the English language for a thriller writer, what if? And what if a woolly mammoth dies 10,000 years ago, freezes, and then because of climate change, it thaws out. And the microbe, the organism, the disease, the fungus, whatever it turns out to be that killed it, when it thaws out, gets loose. And we have no immunity for it.
That's
So
right.
if this thing gets into the water, into the food, it's the end of the world. There's nothing we're going to be able to do. So that's where the speculation comes in. And of course, it also ties in to the smuggling ring that is smuggling Tlingit artifacts out of Sitka and other areas on the same, following the route. And that's how actually this one, I think, Jeff, tell me if you agree, is much more of a procedural. You get into the heads of Michael and Gina as investigators. And the way Michael solves the crime is he realizes he cross references cruise line rosters and figures out certain people have been on this, a family has been on this ship 7 or 8 times when a place has been struck. So he goes undercover. But of course, as Jeff said, what they're really smuggling is a lot more dangerous
Mhm.
than just artifacts, because there's something in there that's connected to what can destroy the world. That's what Axel Cole wants. So he is the guy behind the smuggling ring trying to get this black powder, which is the ultimate energy source out of Alaska, not caring about history or anything else, only caring about himself. Again, the zero sum game. So, and this is the thing: what if questions lead to answers and more what if questions. And um, I think we had so much fun with the Tlingit. You mentioned you raised this before, but the Tlingit native people, researching them is something we did together. And the characters, there are three characters in this book, all family members, a, the tribal leader, the tribal elder who might be 120 years old, and his grandson, her brother. And I love those characters. And to me, as much as Michael and Gina, the Tlingit people, especially those three, getting into the traditions of the Tlingits. Um, it's funny, our editor, who's brilliant and really helped make this book so much better with his edits, he was skeptical about something that the grandfather and grandson do to help them win an impossible battle at the end. But if you research the Tlingit and native peoples, you realize this is what they believe in, that you can manipulate nature. If you revere nature, nature will be with you. So that's where the Preston Childs, Jim Rollins, Clive Cussler comes in, because you're doing something which is a little out there and a little risky, but that's the fun of thrillers.
It is the fun of thrillers. It's also, if well done, even if speculative, it is possible to learn things from them.
Very
The
much
what
so.
if question is not just good for you, but I think it's really good for the reader. And when you were researching the Tlingit people, did you do any sort of dive into their art, which I think is absolutely phenomenal?
Definitely did. When I was visiting Alaska, went to several museums, went to several places where folks would be talking about their art or actually designing the arts and talk to them. And one of the things that you mentioned history, the whole Russian angle of the Tlingits and the Russians, I had no idea how intertwined they kind of were. And when John and I were discussing it, John, of course, said we have to bring that back.
Yeah.
Right.
It,
Well,
Yeah.
we did buy Alaska from Russia, and
yeah.
certainly Sitka is the
Seawards Folly
place.
is what it was
Yeah,
called.
that's right. Seward's
Hmm.
Folly, and certainly
Yep.
Sitka is the place north of Glacier Bay. Excuse me, where the Russian thing is the most obvious. I mean, there's still the bishop's house, there's still the church, all of that. We had a friend that we went to China with who was a professor of art at Northwestern and then became the chairman of the art department at University of Pittsburgh, who collects Tlingit art and actually built a house on a scale where he could display Tlingit art because, it's pretty good size. And I think it's just amazing stuff. We had an opportunity to spend a day in a Tlingit village where they were working on a totem. And,
That'd be
I was
lovely.
just blown away by the whole thing. And it does make you feel like they might have drifted in from another planet.
That's neat.
Yeah, really is. Anyway, tell us about what's going on now with Gina, because we've now talked about Alaska, but she's like in Florida with totally different climate.
Well, I'll have John talk about Gina a little bit, but one of the things we wanted to do was we wanted to have the extremes.
Right.
So if we're in Glacier Bay, where could we go? Well, we talked about Arizona a little bit, and then we thought, oh, the Everglades is perfect. It's like the absolute farthest you can get between the two parks. And so we decided to set Gina's adventure in the Everglades.
Which is again almost like a, place from Mars.
Oh, absolutely.
For sure. And Gina is the former ASAC, Assistant Special Agent in charge of the New York field office of the FBI, and she is in charge of the Joint Terrorism Task Force. That's one of her jobs in New York. So she takes lead in Leave No Trace on the investigation to the Statue of Liberty bombing. Because as a result of that investigation and how it ends, she ends up a kind of agent without portfolio. She
Mhm.
works specifically for the White House. And the thing we loved about that is the nature of the thriller hero is the lone gunman. That's it all comes down from the Western gunfighter. That, thriller heroes, whether they be, old crusty sheriffs or renegade homicide detectives or Navy SEALs, special ops guys, they end up alone. They're like John Wayne in The Searchers or, a Clint Eastwood with the Man with No Name movies. Gunfighters. So making Gina an agent without portfolio allowed us to explore more of she's not working within the system. She's working directly for the president outside the system, which means she, like Michael, can go anywhere and do anything. But sometimes she's not exactly sure why she's been sent to do something, which is the case here. Um, so the thing I really like about her is she has an army background. In Leave No Trace, we made her a demolitions expert. And the reason we did that is otherwise we would have had to had another character into the book, weave someone else into the book who was. So
Sure.
we basically gave her two roles.
Mhm.
She not only is she one of the heroes of the book, she's also the expert in bombs. And since Leave No Trace was about a bomber blowing up the Gateway Arch, Independence Hall, trying to anyway, the Statue of Liberty, and a number of other, and striking at another number of other parks, uh, it comes in really handy when your hero understands what they're doing, how they're doing it, the technology behind it. It's very important in thrillers. I think the bar for thrillers is getting higher and higher as far as scientific plausibility. You could be speculative, but you have to be credible. And if in Cold Burn, um, Amka Reynolds, who is kind of the tribal leader de facto, and Michael gets they only survive this terrible storm by taking refuge in an abandoned coal mine. Well, we didn't make up the fact that there are coal mines in Glacier Bay. There are. And the fact is they've all been closed up. But because she's a native, she knows how to find one. And they go down into it to take shelter from the storm, and they actually use the coal to avoid freezing to death. And that's also credible. You can use it, it doesn't smell very good, but raw coal can be burned like a campfire. to create warmth and light and heat. So those are the things when you're doing a speculative thriller, you still have to pay attention to reality.
I'm trying to remember. I'm having a blank on the name. Andy Weir's book about Mars. What's it
Oh, The
called?
Martian.
Thank you, The Martian. Well, that was a hard title. How did I forget it?
I
Anyway,
love that book.
but
Yeah.
when I read it, it is sort of plausible in the sense that everything that he had that he did was theoretically there, cutting up the potatoes, doing all the rest of it. It wasn't like he summoned a super ray or, some other kind of a thing. I think that's why the book, I'm sorry about the dogs. I think that's why the book took such a hold on people, was that it was exciting, but it was also feasible. I mean,
Yeah.
people who survive situations like that are generally people who just don't give up. Their will to live is so strong that plane crash survivors and so forth, when there are any, very often it's just because they just wouldn't die, they wouldn't lie down. I'm sorry, my husband has a rental car while his car is being fixed, and it's a Beamer that doesn't really fit in our garage, even though it's a full-size garage. The thing's like a damn tank. And so I know what the dogs are barking about is he's trying to get the car into the garage.
Can we swing the camera around so we can watch?
No, unfortunately, but I mean, normally he comes in and it's over, but that's what all this excitement.
Oh my God.
I can't do anything about the dogs.
But
Anyway, so
I wanted to mention real quick, one of the things we wanted, talking about, like the Martian being realistic as
yeah,
possible, we wanted the books here, even though, they're action, die hard in the national parks is how I always pitch them. Um, we wanted to be realistic as much as it could be. So we've talked to rangers, we've worked with the National Park Conservation Association, and we love the parks. And the thing, even though John's never been to them, I've been a park guy since I was a kid, and we didn't want to create an action thriller that made the parks look bad. We actually tried very hard to make them look good, and the people who work for them look great, because they do a phenomenal job keeping these parks going.
totally. I hope you're going to pursue that. I wish you could write a book every 6 months.
That would be
It would
nice.
be excellent to, kind of keep that going. Let's go back to Florida and talk about the sunken nuclear submarine because, now you're in the
Oh,
water
you're back in
again.
Alaska for that, actually.
Were you?
Hmm.
Oh, that's right. She was in Florida, but then right. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
She gets
It's been
sent.
a while since I read
Yeah.
this book, so there we go.
Yes.
But right. So why a sunken submarine?
We learned from one of our folks we talked to that one of the small islands in Alaska where we set the book, there's remnants of World War II weapons. And we thought, oh, this is kind of neat. And so once we realized that, we got on like, hey, we should do a submarine scene. And so,
That's very true. You can go out to the Aleutians. We've actually done that. We did the Northwest Passage cruise from Seward, the first one that you could do as a commercial thing, from Seward all around Alaska, across the top of Canada, over to Greenland, and back again. And there's so much World War II stuff out in the Aleutians, which were close to Japan. And,
mhm.
I don't think many of us, we're so focused on the European theater in World War II, most of us, that the Asian theater is not as familiar to us. But I mean, Alaska was really out there on the front line in a way that I hadn't really thought about until we did that. It's also scary to sail around Alaska and through that place in the Bering Sea where there's only 3 miles between Russia and Alaska. It
Oh,
really
wow.
brings,
Yeah.
well, yeah, I know it, especially scary now. But I do love the idea that you can take people to places they might not, unlike me, might not necessarily go. And the national parks provide you with incredible landscapes, incredible geology, you know, ancient cultures, modern cultures, all kinds of things. I mean, I think they're a brilliant backdrop. I know how much people love Nevada books, and I was kind of surprised that more people didn't take that up. I mean, I think that's one reason people like CJ's books so much is they get a tour of Wyoming, which in a way is just like a giant national park, you know?
Well, and I should also mention that each chapter of the books opens with a factoid about where that chapter is set. As you mentioned earlier, it's great thrillers, or it's also fun to learn something at the same time. And so we sort of decided to do it that way. So you learn more about the parks, and hopefully, if you haven't visited them, you want to go visit.
And
Absolutely.
when you talk about the submarine, Barbara,
Oh, yeah.
you know, I grew up, I used to I loved Agatha Christie whodunits when I was a kid. And before I was in love, I fell in love with thrillers. I was in love with who did it. But now that I'm a thriller writer, it's always been, how did they do it? How did this happen? The mystery is not who killed someone, it's how all these people died. So the notion, it was backing into something. And the idea that the entire crew of the most advanced nuclear submarine in our fleet froze to death in 60-degree temperatures. Well, right away, it's kind of like, how is that possible?
Yeah.
And again, when you're trying, nothing matters if the reader doesn't keep flipping the pages. And that became a great Hitchcockian MacGuffin. That, because of course we know that it's all connected. What happened to that crew is connected to what's being smuggled out of all the museums by Axel Cole, the Elon Musk-like character. So it all ties together in the end, but it takes a while to get there because you've got all these pieces. But that's the fun of putting a thriller together for the reader, because the reader knows more than the characters know because they're privy to all the conversations, but
Right.
they still have to put the puzzle together. Just like if you love whodunits, you're trying to play along with your Hercule Poirot or Sherlock Holmes or one of Ed McBain's characters, or Donald Westlake's characters, and you're trying to figure out who did it. Now it's, how did those people on that sub die? How'd they freeze to death in when it was well above freezing temperatures on board? Makes no sense. And interestingly enough, I have to say that the solution to that, the answer is scarily plausible. What
I'm
ends up
sorry to hear
happening
that. I
is,
really am. Right.
I'm sorry to tell you that, but you
Yeah.
know, don't mess with nature is the moral of the story.
Well, I
So,
have to say the first draft we did of the sub scenes,
Oh,
we
please.
we're friends with Brian Andrews, who writes with Jeff Wilson,
right.
and Brian used to be on a submarine, so
Okay.
he's
Right.
the perfect person to talk to. And he got on Zoom with us and talked to us for about an hour and a half, and just basically said, "No, no, no," and he helped us, and much better as a result, and much more realistic
I'm
now.
sure it
And it's,
is.
yeah.
Brian has caught thriller fever as well. So he and Jeff have been here several times. And I think we're working on a reappearance in December for, again, trying to get two guys together, in one
Uh-huh,
place.
uh-huh.
Mm.
Physically is hard. But on
Yes.
your point, I noticed a review, which I called up. Uh, One of the big reviews for your books ends by saying, Landau treads familiar ground, but keeps the pages turning without sacrificing plausibility. So that's
Ooh,
really what you're saying here is that, you do uh, what you do is plausible, which I think is, what you're striving for there, that it
awkward.
should be scary and, imaginative and wildly unusual, but actually plausible. I had some conversations with Doug Preston when he wrote Extinction. And, that's based, as you've already pointed out, on the ability to clone these extinct. I mean, it's not like Jurassic Park. It has a different thing. Well, it's sort of like Jurassic Park in lots of ways. But anyway, the woolly mammoth. Of course, the difficulty with cloning these species, well, not the difficulty, probably the desirability is that they are sterile. They can't reproduce. So, so far, it'd be a good thing. Otherwise, we'd have a herd of woolly mammoths, traveling traveling around.
I'm looking
So
forward
what are
to the
you
sequel
working
to
on?
that.
Where are you heading next? Since you've got, a wealth of parks to choose, what did you decide to do next?
The next book is, I'll just say, Michael Walker is going to have a blast.
Ah,
Ah,
tell her
okay.
the title.
Volcanoes. Huh?
Blast Radius is the title.
Oh, wow. Excellent title. Right.
Mhm.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
is theoretically coming out next spring?
that's the hope.
Great. Well, I'm
Awesome.
delighted to hear that. So, are either of you writing individually in addition to writing together, or is this taking up all your time?
I
I'm
write,
actually, oh, go ahead, John.
I ghostwrite also,
You
which I
do.
have,
Are you allowed to say that?
oh yes, and because it's collaborative writing, we're changing. I mean, the whole industry is changing. Like contractually, my name goes on every book.
Okay.
So it's not it's ghostwriting because they're hiring. It's collaborative writing, and I really enjoy that. I remember my nonfiction idol was Studs Terkel, one of the
Oh,
great
yeah.
interviewers of all time, Chicago journalist who wrote Working American Dreams, Lost and Found, which was my favorite, The Good War, which was
Right.
Greatest Generation before that. But Studs Terkel was on Johnny Carson one night, and he said something I'll never forget. He said, when someone is giving you their story, they're giving you their life. And I never forgot that. And when I do narrative nonfiction or I'm telling someone's story, which is about abuse or grief, it's a lot of nonfiction is not telling happy stories.
Yeah.
And um, it's a great compliment at this stage of my career to be doing something in journalism and interviews. That's how I started way back, in the 70s, early 80s was with interviews for magazines like People and the Saturday Evening Post. I even worked did a couple articles for the National Enquirer because they paid so well. And they were the only, Barbara, believe it or not, they were the only outlet that asked me for my tapes. They
Really?
had, they would not publish an article by by me anyway,
Sure.
without me submitting the tapes to them to prove that these people had said the things.
Well, they'd been sued. They'd been sued before, John. So,
Yes, I
they're
guess I
not
guess
novices at the
they
whole
learned
thing.
their lessons. But yeah, so outside of this space, and I'm doing the series with Heather. We're into the third book in our sci-fi series that started with The Rising, Blood Moon, and now Dark Harbor. So I still have that series going.
But
Um,
that's collaborative writing, which is what you're doing with Jeff. But ghostwriting, am I correct in thinking that ghostwriting is largely memoir writing?
to a great extent. Um, Narrative memoir because
Yeah,
it's someone who has something important to say that happened in their own life,
right.
and they're willing. It's important enough for them to use their own resources to hire someone like me. And of course, the industry, necessity is the mother of invention, right? I didn't do this out of choice because I wanted to. I did it, Barbara, because I had to, because it became so hard to make the same living I had always made in publishing, quite frankly, because of the death of mass market.
Right.
I'm a creature of mass market. My friend and publisher, Tom Doherty, who's at 90, is still CEO of Torforge. He could sell 50,000 of my paperbacks when, hardcovers would sell a few, 3, 4, 5, 6,000. But those mass markets in uh, airports and train stations and the mall stores. And then little by little, we lost them all. And now, of course, Reader Link, mass market might be dead altogether because they're not going to distribute them. So, bottom line, I was lucky enough to be able to transition into a different space while keeping hold of myself as a thriller writer, which grounds me. But it doesn't pay the bills anymore, to be honest with you.
No, I can certainly understand that. We've been steadily shrinking our mass market shelves, which at one point were the largest section of the bookstore. It's hard to find more than half a dozen that are coming out as a general rule anymore. Part of that, excuse me, part of that is a lack of distribution. Part of it is the effect of e-readers. I mean, mass market was created to be cheap and portable, and it's been beaten out by technology, but also for older readers, the mass market format is hard to navigate. In a digital reader, you can expand the type and turn, but the larger paperback is just easier. So, but we talked about it the other day. We have always had, excuse me, a separate section for the small paper. We call them small because mass market's really a publishing term. Small
Uh-huh.
paperbacks for readers, and we decided with this issue that there weren't enough of them to give them their own section, and so we would just incorporate them into paperbacks because there's so few. So you're right that, and there were loads of mass market originals. It was,
My career, my
yeah,
first
no,
13
it
books,
was. Do you
mass
remember
market.
when Berkeley had something like 900 different mass market series and authors going on, and they owned, they would own the name and the concept and hire somebody to write it very often. I mean, there were different kinds of mass markets, but that was a very prevalent one, which takes you all the way back to like Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys, which were
Doc Savage. I grew up on Doc Savage.
that's right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, I think reader trend, publishing trends, all kinds of things contribute to publishing's always evolving, always evolving. And some of it's technology and format, some of which I just wrote a sympathy note to my two authors who have been up number one or number two for quite a while. And I said to them, it's an amazing achievement to be even on the list in the top 10 at the moment because it's totally dominated by fantasy and romance. And I've been saying to publishers that if they really want thrillers to compete, they're going to have to start generating the same kind of beautiful packaging that, I call it shelf wealth, which I stole from the New York Times. But basically, the sprayed edges and the maps and all, I mean, if for $30 you can buy a book that looks like that from Tor, why do you want to spend $32 buying just a sort of ordinary looking hardcover? I think there's a whole evolution once again going on, and part of it's technology driven because printing has evolved to the point where you can actually do that kind of thing at an affordable price, and you don't have to send it to China, even more important at the moment. So, I've been doing this for almost 36 years based on absolutely zero experience in retail. I was a librarian at the Library of Congress before I retired early at the age of 50 and thought it would be more fun to have a bookstore than become a lawyer again. And I mean, I've been absolutely fascinated watching all of it. And it's a constantly churning environment. So, you guys have to work hard to stay on top of it. I certainly understand that. And find income streams as one drives up, you have to move over there and find another. But really at the end of it, it's the story that wins, isn't it? As long as you can tell a story, you can work out the rest of it.
Mhm. Sure. Um, so I have a cozy mystery coming out,
You do. Look at
coming
that.
out in August called Picking Up the Pieces. I wrote this with my friend Brian Tracy, and we met at Thriller Fest several years ago. And
It looks like a Kensington cover. Is that a
it's actually
Kensington?
a Crooked Lane.
It's a crook. Well, that was my other choice,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
They
Yeah.
picked up a lot of the Berkeley authors. That was kind of their business plan when they started.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was. It was a real
So
shock for a lot of people who were used to $7.99 paperbacks to suddenly be paying $28.99 for a hardcover. But
Barbara, I started my career with Walter Zacharias. I
oh,
did
you
first,
did. Well,
I
I
did my
remember
first,
Walton.
I did my first three paperbacks with Zebra before it was even Kensington was the bigger company.
Yeah,
And he was so proud of his company and those covers, he loved his covers so much, and they were some of the best in the business. And to this day, when I think about did I make the right call when I moved to Random House after three books, because Walter, it was his own money. He didn't like paying advances, and the royalty rates were awful. But what a wonderful man! I'm still friends with Stephen, and some of the people at Kensington. For some reason, it still feels like home. You
yeah.
know, Walter picked me up at the slush pile. My first mass market was $2.99. back in the day.
I remember that. Yeah, I remember when hardcovers were like 14.99, and
Sure.
19.99 seemed like a threshold. Now the threshold is $30. And do you know the new Dan Brown is priced at $38?
Oh
I'm
my
actually
God.
I'm actually going to write to our customers, although a surprising number of them have already pre-ordered it, and say, buy it somewhere else and take the money that you saved and come and buy a different book from us, because that's just such a ridiculous price. I can
Wow.
hardly believe it.
I had no idea.
I know. It's just like, come on, guys. But anyway, um,
Oh, so in addition to this cozy coming
yeah,
out
all
of this,
right.
you've mentioned Doug Preston and
Oh,
Lincoln Child a
yes.
few times. I'm actually working on a nonfiction book that's a companion guide to their work, both solo and together.
Well,
It's the
how
facts
fun.
behind the fiction. There's going to be a couple of quizzes. There's going to be an original short story.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm writing that with them.
Are you doing it for Grand Central?
Yes, I am.
Wonderful. Well, we'll have to do something exciting when it comes out, because Doug has every book Doug Preston has ever written has been here. So
Be fun to
um,
get us to have three signatures in that. We'll see if
if
we can
we
pull that
could.
off.
That'd be fun. Well, Lincoln doesn't travel, so
Right.
we have to send things to Lincoln, but we're used to that. We have that situation down pat. Patrick, come and join us and see if we have elicited any kind of response besides stupefaction from everybody watching it.
Is anyone still awake?
Well, they seem to be quite a silent group tonight.
Really?
We do have, I kind of put my dragnet out there for questions, and so far they're pretty quiet.
All right. Do you have any comments of your own you'd like to make?
No, it was a fascinating discussion, though. I really enjoyed listening, but I don't have
So,
any questions.
right, you and I have been together through this trawl almost the entire time. So you remember Nevada. You've worked with Doug and
Please,
Lincoln and me forever.
something didn't happen, did it?
What, with Nevada?
Yeah.
No, she stopped writing.
Oh,
I
okay. I
think
thought,
she
oh boy, that's
and
good.
I had to agree with her. Anna Pigeon put in a lot of physical effort and a lot of physical punishment, and Nevada, like Michael Connelly and Ian Rankin and other authors, had aged her in real time. And it came to a moment, I think she told me, when Anna turned 50, that it wasn't plausible for Anna to be doing those things anymore. And I think that
50?
Nevada wrote two or three other kinds of books after
Mhm.
Anna Pigeon, one of which was really terrifying. The one about the little boy whose family was slaughtered. I mean, it was a hair-raising book for sure. But I think she just sort of
Yeah.
ran out of gas. As far as I know, she's living happily in New Orleans. You guys might see her if you're at BoucherCon.
Usher yeah.
Oh, hope
Yeah,
so. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Be great.
There's
One
also
of the things
Scott.
I wanted to mention real fast is try not to steer political, but we hope that the books will stir people to remember how wonderful the parks are because of the discussion that's going on now. If it passes the way it currently is scheduled to go, the Park Service will have to close 350 of the 430 sites that they oversee.
yeah. It's going to be a bloodbath.
Yeah, I,
For how
I
many
want
people,
them.
Jeff? How many people visits to the national parks the last couple of years, the peak? How many of those visits are going to go away for families and tourists and visitors? What's the number?
It's over
Depends.
450 million visits a year to all the sites,
Yep.
and they make money too, which is
Yes, but I think that the dire and long-term goal is to privatize the parks so that the oligarchs currently in charge of our country get to make more money. That's what I think is happening.
yeah, I don't want to go to Zion and
Political in
see
that
an oil
statement.
derrick. I really
Mhm.
don't. I don't want to go to Zion and see an oil derrick pumping oil. That's just I go to these places to find solace and to appreciate nature and yeah, and I want my grandkids and their grandkids to experience the same
Now, if
thing
enough
I did.
people don't stand up and, keep this from happening, there we are.
Barbara, that's why I don't want to make this a spoiler alert, but the way Axel Cole gets what's coming to him when he gets his comeuppance in the end of Cold Burn, Jeff and I knew that our characters were not capable of giving him what he deserves. So I actually brought back my most successful series hero and his right-hand man, Johnny War Eagle. But Blaine McCracken comes out of retirement to serve on Axel Cole. And it was cathartic in the sense that, just for the reasons you and Jeff just alluded to, when you're talking about closing 350 national parks, the most beautiful, one of the most treasures of this country. Why? And again, it's the mindset of these people that Axel Cole represents. So I have done over 50, around 56 thrillers, maybe almost 60 now. I've always prided myself on villains. What he gets his just rewards in the end. Jeff, you've read all my books, so
I've
basically,
been a fan since the late 80s.
I think
stuff,
I
so.
think that's the greatest comeuppance I've ever served upon a villain. And I should say we served upon a villain in this book. Would you agree?
I had a blast with it, and I'm glad you brought
No pun
Johnny back.
intended, given of what
Well,
McCracken
that's
does,
true, yes.
what McCracken does to him. But
Yes.
it's and that's the fun. That's the fun of writing, Barbara. It never gets old. I'm as excited about a book now as I was in 1983 when I published my first one. And the process is still the process. I can't believe I wrote my first 8 books on a Smith Corona typewriter. I had to retype everything. You're trying to figure out how to squeeze words in so you don't have to retype a page on the old erasable paper. But computers, printers, Smith Corona typewriters, it's still all about the story and the process. And as long as I keep loving it, it's like, why would I do anything else? And I'm lucky to be able to do this.
Well, and
It's true.
it's
That's
surreal for me having something that, thought of, worked with John, and seeing it in physical form and having folks read it and like it it's the dream. It really is.
Well, I'm glad you shared it with us. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Patrick, if there's nothing else to say, we will thank our authors for joining us. Our double-signed copies of Cold Burn, which I think is a really wonderful book, should be with us by the end of June. They're getting signed next week in New York, and then they have to ship here, so it'll be a while. But anyway, there'll be a limited number of them, so if you're interested, you should get in touch with us and reserve one while we still have them. So, gentlemen, I'll see you next week in New York. Thank you very much for coming to spend time with us, and good night, everybody.